Welcome everybody to our second class of Latin America. And remember to make comments through the WhatsApp group. You can also make questions through there. You can also use the live chat, but I'm not gonna be checking that so much. So today we're gonna talk about the history of Latin America. So this is another position I'm trying out. So the first things we should know is that how we're we know that geologic history has more to do with plate tectonics, and we have been seeing that. But when we talk about the history of Latin America, we're talking about more about the culture, and which is, culture is related in a way to the geography because of resources, because of what makes a group of persons settle in one place or become nomads or etc. Or whatever interaction is humans are having with nature. So first we must consider. So I'm gonna draw a map of the world, as I always do, and we have to consider some things over here. Okay, so this is the northern eastern tip of Asia. So we have Japan over here, Siberia, Russia, and this is the Bering Sea. And as we are familiar with geography, we know that there is a not such a large distance between the northeastern tip of Asia and the northwestern tip of America. During the Ice Ages, because most of the world, the northern hemisphere, the very polar parts were during ice, then the sea levels dropped. So what I'm making here is an ice cap that covered the world during the Ice Ages. So whenever we have an ice age, we have a little bit more land because, as we have seen in science before, ice, the creation of ice consumes a little bit of water. So there was more land, and these lands were actually connected. Well, I imagine Japanese islands were also connected. Well, and this created an opportunity for migration to occur. And migration did occur. So this is the most accepted theory of human migration in how humans came to populate the Americas. Now let me check if I have some questions, things here. I'm gonna ask you, is everything alright? Everything okay with the transmission? Transmission. Okay, everything seems okay. Nobody seems to be saying problems. Okay, so humans eventually, we're talking about 30,000 years ago or more than 30,000 years ago. There was this ice age, the last of the ice ages, which allowed humans to migrate from Asia to the Americas. And why were humans migrating? Because we were nomads. Our ancestors were nomads. We still had not discovered or invented agriculture, so we had to follow animals in order to get food. And animals were, very large animals like mammoths and giant sloths, where they were also following their food, patterns, which connected in that moment of history. They were drawn to cross to the Americas. So these are the first settlers of the Americas, or this is the most accepted theory. There could be possibilities that also that Americans came by sea, but that had to be later on, or but this is the most accepted theory right now. Most conclusions lead to here. Maybe the dates are not exact. Some people say that it's more than 30,000 years because they have found ruins that have been dated like 50,000 years or more. But the thing is that eventually America got populated, and all of America got populated, and some places of population, most of these settlers learned about agriculture in a way, or in a small way, or in a larger way, depending on, as I told you before, their environment. For example, places like the Amazon, it's possible that they didn't have to develop agriculture so much because all of the resources that are found already in the jungle, it's like you don't need agriculture when you just have to go outside and hunt easily, or not easily but abundantly, in comparison to other places that are not such well irrigated as the jungle. Places like deserts, or places like grasslands, or places like the mountains here in the Andes. And these are the places where agriculture eventually became the thing, the establishment. And there were certain crops that were the most important. In most of the Americas, North America, Central America, and including South America, the Andes region, we have corn or maize, right? Which are the same. And but also we have another, so this was the most important crop in most of the Americas. But in South America, they developed another crop, which is potatoes. So among other crops, right? But these were like the most important for each region. Maize for, most of North America, Mesoamerica, which is the center of America. And also maize was very important in the Andean regions, but as I was telling you, potatoes were even more important than maize because they had, the people in the Andes learned to preserve potatoes by, in such a way that would become their main crop. Okay. Eventually, with time, some populations began, now that agriculture was invented in the Americas independently from before, because when they came, it still had not invented. The ice thawed. That means that the ice melted, and now it was, we were isolated once again. But we have all of these different, populations all over the Americas. Now, it's important to notice some of the regions that would become the largest, let's say, or yeah, the largest civilizations in the Americas, which are Mesoamerica, which covers Mexico and Central America, and also the Andean region, which covers the Andes Mountains. In these two regions, many different cultures developed throughout history. Many cultures, one of the first were the Olmecs. And the Olmecs were in what is today Mexico. And they were when the Maya came around the years 100 to 300 Anno Domini, that means of the Common Era, they were like influenced by the Olmecs, the Maya. And the Maya, their area of influence was the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, of Guatemala, Belize, the western part of Honduras, and the western tip of El Salvador also. And they were like the Greeks in a sense that they did not make an empire. They had different city-states. That means that they did not have an empire. Each of the cities was independent, ruled by a local king. So they had a monarchy system. And they also had a very important clergy. That is the people that do religious things. They were very mystical. They also had scribes and other scholars. Scribes are the people that can write, and they had a system of written language, hieroglyphics. They also had, when I mean scholars, these are people that study a lot. For example, astronomers, mathematicians. They had they gave a lot of importance to the study of the skies and the study of the numbers. They also had very precise calendars. And why are calendars important? Because, well, one of the reasons calendars are important is to keep a track of time. But for them, also for ancient civilizations, calendars were important because they needed to know when to make their crops, how to plan their agriculture, when to plant and when to harvest. All of these different things were super important for their daily life because in this depended their economy and their life, just as ours. We have our basis on the calendar also. If you consider today's agriculture, agriculturers, they are farmers. They have to know exactly when to plant, and they have to consider the time of the year as well as the climate and the weather of the season. So just as today it's important, so these technologies developed way in the past. And people like the Maya were specialists. They knew exactly how much the year lasted. They had a count for thousands of years. They tried to predict uh, astronomical phenomena like solar eclipse. They were very good at it. And so these are the things the Maya are most noted about. And the Maya, they, for some reason, they they stopped living in the cities that they created. As I told you before, they lived in city states, many of them. Well, some lived in the rural areas, but they had cities also developed. And for like Copan is one of these cities. Also, other famous cities are Tikal, Chichen Itza, um, and Caracol, for example. So we see that they left no, because when the Spanish came, the Spanish that also wrote their history about how they encountered the Americas, they were no longer city states populated by, the Maya city states were not populated anymore. They were in ruins already. So what happened to the Maya? There are some theories that suggest that maybe they had overpopulation, and that they over exploited the land and they cut the forest too much. And probably, also they could have been in wars between the different city states because they were warrior tribes. So those are the theories that, or hypotheses about why the Mayas disappeared. But they didn't disappear, because the only thing that happened is that they stopped living in the cities. The people would, we still today we have descendants of the Maya, especially in Guatemala, but we also have some in Honduras, like the Chortis. But today, some people are even talking the Maya language. They are retaking the Maya astrology, for example, and the Maya in some way, returning to their ancient knowledge. So Maya is still a thing. Maya are still living. They're not the center stage of Latin American affairs, but they still, the descendants of Maya are still around. So that's pretty cool to know. Not in the city states, but they live in smaller communities. Now, one of the now when the Spanish came, there was one big empire, which is the Aztec Empire. And they did have an empire, which was the central part of Mexico, but their area of influence was all over Mesoamerica. One thing we have to consider is that Mesoamerica was not isolated from the rest of Americas. They made trade. They had healthy trade within their empire, and also with North America and with South America. It is known that they could travel by boats along the coast, and there was trade going on. Trade was going on throughout the Americas. And well, now I want to talk a little bit about the Aztecs. The Aztecs were a group of tribes that united to create an empire, and they were warring tribes. They were they were very good at fighting, so they basically conquered all of this region of central Mexico. And, well, as an empire, they had different other tribes under their command. And this is very important to notice later on, because when the Spanish came, the tribes that the Aztecs had conquered rebelled against the Aztecs. They, they allied with the Spanish, and well, that helped the Spanish conquer Mesoamerica. That helped Hernán Cortés conquer Mesoamerica. So I'm going to come back to that. But the going back before to when the Spanish came, the Aztecs, they had, they were a large civilization. They were very studied, just like the Maya in astronomy, mathematics, but they also had a large population. They were an empire. They had a lot of resources. And, when the Spanish came, the Spanish were amazed at the capital city. The capital city of Tenochtitlan. This was the capital city of the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan. A marvelous city. Larger city than any city that had been ever seen in Europe. This was a city that was created over a lake. There is a story that says the ancestors of the Aztecs, where should they settle? And maybe you have seen the flag of Mexico. Let me look for it. Okay, guys, so I have, let me put this here. Okay, so let me try something. So, have you seen the Mexican flag? If you notice the Mexican flag, the center of the Mexican flag, I'm just checking here because sometimes I have problems, but it's okay right now. So, as you can see, there's a story behind the Mexican flag. It is the place, as you can see, there's like this blue thing here. Well, that is the symbol of a lake, and on this lake there's an island. On this island there is a cactus. You can see the cactus, and on the cactus there's an eagle holding a snake. Well, the legend says that for the ancestors of the Aztecs, or the Mexica, like the Mexicans, the Mexica. No, the Mexica were one of these groups of Aztecs, the Mexica. And the legend said that the place where you find an eagle posing on a cactus holding a snake, that is the place where you should make your city. Okay, that is a place where you should establish yourself. And that's what they did. So that's the story of the legend, where the Aztecs decided that they would make their city. And that's exactly where they did it. They did it on Lake Texcoco. So the city of Tenochtitlan was built over Lake Texcoco. So if we could look at Lake Texcoco, something like this, well, Well, why don't we look at the city of Tenochtitlan over here? So check it out. So I like this one because it shows us a view from above. So as you can see, it's surrounded by a lake. And we can also see a layout of the architecture of the city. It's a pretty cool city. So when you go to Mexico today, you think you can go to the ruins of Tenochtitlan? Well, the thing is, you can and you can't because did you see that, or didn't you see? Did you see it with me or not? Hope you did. So I was showing her here, and this is the layout of the. So this is the architecture of the city, and this was the layout. As you can see, it's over a lake. Okay, so as I was telling you, or let me, because I have to bring my charger. The computer is on charging, so let me, so you can check out a little bit more. You can also do it with your own Google. Hey guys, so I'm almost back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry guys, I had to connect the I had to connect the computer, so I'm sorry. So let me take. I hope that you took some time to look at Tenochtitlan for the moment, because it's a pretty cool city. Okay, let me see if I have something on the chat. Nothing on the chat. Okay, so we're good to go. Now, why can't you go to the ruins? Why can and you can't go to the ruins of Tenochtitlan? Because when the Spanish conquered Tenochtitlan, they made their capital city over Tenochtitlan. So the capital city of Mexico City, let me put it over here better. So Tenochtitlan was like this. So following the tradition of Mesoamerican civilizations, because something that that is curious about the Maya, about the Aztecs, is that they would build, you know, when one ruler wanted to show their power. For example, one ruler left their temple like this, right? Okay, so we have a temple over here. The next ruler would make his temple over the old ruin, but conserving the previous ruin, in a way that showing that they were on the shoulders, or that they were above, like in a way like a continuum, you know, in a way showing their power, but that they are not, that they are the successors of the previous power. So this was something that they did, that they would build over the ruins, or not the ruins, they would build over the temples of the previous ruler. So this is a way that their temples started to grow, because underneath important temples they would build other temples. And they also preserved the temples underneath them. So this is pretty cool about the Mesoamerican civilizations. And that, and ironically or paradoxically, that's what happened with Tenochtitlan. The Spanish built the city of Mexico City, was built on top of Tenochtitlan. And remember that we have a lake over here. So Tenochtitlan was built over a lake, but Tenochtitlan was, they created some islands, artificial islands like caña. They created these islands, and they would fill the islands also with soil, but they would still have, you know, their lake to protect them in a way. And they also, as we saw in the photograph before, they also interacted with the lake. Today the lake is practically has disappeared, but the thing is that Mexico City is like sinking into this soil, because now the soil is like very watery. So Mexico City has problems with where they were built. And also many parts, imagine that they want to build a new building in Mexico City, so they start to dig the ground, and sometimes they find ruins of Tenochtitlan on this site that they wanted to make the building. So they find ruins, you know, a lot of the time before, when they want to start building other buildings. And as you know, Mexico City today is a very modern city with skyscrapers and large buildings and museums, etc. And they also like to conserve their history. So whenever they encounter these types of things, when they want to build something and they find ruins of Tenochtitlan, they preserve the ruins better, or they move the ruins. They try to preserve as much as they can and then build. So this is some of Tenochtitlan. Now, uh, as we know, on the year 1492, and on the 14th of April, so this day, that's why it's remembered as Dia de las Americas. If you were hearing that this was celebrated for some people, for not for us, but this is the day that Columbus and the Europeans came, and they came from the east, and this is when things changed radically on the Americas. They first came to the islands of the Caribbean, and Christopher Columbus thought that he had come to the India. And why the India? The India is over here, man. It's even more to the west than here. Because back in the day, let me make another map of the world. Let me put Europe here in the center. And we have Africa. There we have India. And okay, so back in the day in Europe, just as the Aztecs were happening here in America, in Europe they were having a thing about trading with India. They had a thing because something called spices. You know, las especies. These are things to cook, but back in the day, they were also used for preserving food. And there was a whole trade, but some people already had the control of the trade. For example, if they would trade by land, it was the Persians and the Arabs who had control of the trade. And here in the Mediterranean Ocean, it was the Italians who had control of this trade. But if maybe the trade would go through here, well, it didn't go to Europe through here. But either way, they did not have control of the trade. So that meant that the spices were expensive for them, and the people who were winning with the trade were not them, because they were only buying from them. So these countries in Europe, they started to explore the seas with their new knowledge, now that they had new scientific technology. Starting with Portugal, they started to travel by boat to these islands. To islands, yeah. Well, there are some islands important here that we mentioned before. These are called the East Indies for the Europeans. Well, these are the Indies. You know, Indonesia, Malaysia. They're actually called the Malaccas, the islands. So Portuguese had a route, but the Spanish didn't. And there was this person called Columbus. He's an Italian sailor, and he said, hey, why don't we, there is proof that the earth is not flat. There is proof that the earth is actually round. So Columbus knew that the earth was not flat like this board. He knew that the earth was round. But so he knew that eventually, if he sailed to the west, he would eventually get to India, right? So his logic was correct. But there was a problem with his logic. He thought the world was smaller than it is, and he didn't know about a continent being in his way. And this is our continent, people. Yeah. So Columbus, a little mistake in your calculations led to the, you know, to a world change, because this changed the world. But we're gonna talk a little bit more in the next class about how European conquest changed the world. I just want to tell you today that the conquistador that conquered the Aztecs was, you know it, Hernán Cortés. And so he is responsible for making these alliances with the other, remember that the Aztecs had their empire and they conquered other peoples? Well, Hernán Cortés got these other peoples to rebel against the Aztecs. And another thing that helped, the story behind Cortés is very interesting, and I'm gonna try to summarize it up. There was a legend in Aztec mythology about a bearded, man coming from the east, and this was the return of their god Quetzalcoatl. So the Aztecs were expecting that someday a bearded man from the east would, be their god. So in a way, they when Hernán Cortés came, I have heard that they believed that he was the god Quetzalcoatl, but I'm not sure about that story. I have to hear it again. I have to look for it again. But what I do know is that the Emperor Moctezuma, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma, invited Hernán Cortés to his palace. And Hernán Cortés had only a few men. He didn't have so much men, but like soldiers. And they were invited to his palace, and Hernán Cortés, in the end, they captured Moctezuma and they made him his, they lo secuestraron. They held him captive, and then they started all this, rebellion. That is when Hernán Cortés made the allies from the other tribes, etc. And they went to war. But there was an invisible enemy that was also an ally of the Spanish, which was disease. Diseases like, there was this virus of viruela, the smallpox, and this virus, the people of the Americas did not have immunity. Just like us, we don't have immunity right now for the coronavirus. The people of the Americas did not have immunity for the viruela. Spanish people did have immunity for the viruela because this was something old for them. But for the Americans, this was new. And they did not have medicine or, immunity. So and viruela, this was a pandemic for the Americas. And it spread starting from here to the rest of the world. It spread pretty quickly. Remember, we saw that in the video. It spread pretty quickly, viruela, throughout the Americas. And this helped the Spanish more than anything else to conquer the Americans. Spanish had more technology. Yes, they did. But we had the numbers. The Americans, the Aztecs, had the numbers. But their numbers were drastically lowered. They were lowered so much that it is believed that only 10% of the Native American population survived. That means that 90% of the population was killed. 90% was killed. Okay. Sad story, but that's our story. Now, just to finish this, and didn't talk a lot about the Incas. I hope that you read, people, and that you learn for yourselves. Just like in Mesoamerica, the Incas were not the first. They were just the ones that built the largest empire in South America. They were not the first. There were other very interesting civilizations, like the Chavín. But one of my favorites is the Nazca civilization. I just want to show you something. Something that are called the Nazca lines. let me show you here. Uh, follow me here. Are you here with me? No. Huh. Where are you? Yes, you're here. So check it out, the Nazca lines. This is in South America. This is by a people known as the Nazca. These are in the desert, and they made this huge, you know, shapes of animals. And check out the spider, the hummingbird. We have the this is like an eagle, or I don't know, the condor, and there's like a whatever there. Like a humanoid. There's like this bird or dinosaur. There's also the monkey. Let me see if we can find the monkey. Yeah, there's giant drawings. You know, these are giant drawings that you can only see from above. So I recommend that you check out the Nazca lines. Yes, this is a good image because, well, you can see the airplane over there. And yeah, Nazca lines. There's even like this humanoid thing. Well, Nazca lines. But we're not going to talk too much about the Nazca people. We're going to talk more about the Inca, which they created, just like the Aztecs. They created an empire along the coast of the Pacific that contained the today countries of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Bolivia. And so the Inca, man, they were pretty excel. Also, they excelled in their construction. They had no written language like the Maya did, but they had oral language. They had religion, oral tradition. They also had a language, a form of communication where they would weave some, you know, like weaving. So they were great architects. Well, the image of this video is one of the architecture of the Incas, which is the city of Machu Picchu. They also had important cities like Cusco, which was their capital. So, erasing a little bit of this. So, the capital of the Inca Empire was Cusco. They had one of the most important achievements. Well, we mentioned potato already, but they had a system of communication of roads. They created roads that communicated all of their empire. So they had a system of roads. Just like the Romans had their own system of roads for rapid communication, the Inca had their system of roads of rapid communication. But unlike the Romans that had horses, the Inca, you know, nobody in America had horses, as we saw in the last partial. So everything had to be made by foot. So they had a system of runners. That one runner would give a message or a package to the next one, and so in this way, you know, information could travel faster and control would be easier for the emperors, because yes, Cusco was also an empire. I mean, the Inca was also an empire, so they had their emperor living in Cusco. And the emperor could also go hang out to Machu Picchu, because this was the place, you know, like a sacred place. Machu Picchu was high in the mountains. Machu Picchu, you know, I'm lucky enough that I have been there. It's pretty cool. I did not have money to go to the Nazca lines. I passed very close to the Nazca lines, but you know, I was in the Nazca lines, but I didn't have the money to buy a plane ticket, because you have to go by plane. You cannot see them on the ground because they are so big. Okay, so Machu Picchu. So Machu Picchu is pretty cool. I totally recommend it. It's a pretty nice adventure. Also, if you don't have the money, you can save a lot by going by foot along the trailways. So it's pretty interesting. And Peru is like full of ruins. There we have a nice picture with the llama there. Oh, nice picture here. Machu Picchu. So, and I loved it. I really liked it. Let me see, are you watching here with me? Yes, you are watching here with me. So, so this is Machu Picchu. And up here, there are ruins up here, man. This is Huayna Picchu. And the thing is, I don't have any photographs from my trip because we didn't take, there were no smartphones, and we still used camera, and they stole our camera. So we don't have any photographs of this marvelous trip. And yeah, so next time you go on a trip, you should definitely, take photos and upload them quickly. I had photographs here, standing on here, on top of the world, on top of these ruins. Imagine that there are ruins built all over here. You cannot see them here, but they're definitely there. And there are some ruins in Cusco too. Cusco is a pretty cool city. Cusco is a very cool city because it's a mixture of the modern. You can see the Spanish. You have also ruins in Cusco. That's pretty cool. There are some Incan ruins in Cusco. And you have like the Spanish background there, maybe on this photograph, because the ruins are on top. You can't see the ruins in here. Okay, so, well, Cusco became, as we all know, the Spanish came and conquered. And when the Spanish came and conquered, as we learned from the last partial, America was already suffering with the smallpox, with viruela. They were already suffering with smallpox, viruela, and when Pizarro and his crew, something interesting happened. Well, here, so it was for the Aztecs. It was Hernán Cortés, and here was Pizarro. The conqueror of the Inca was Pizarro, and when he came with his Spanish, well, there was already a civil war, an inner war, an internal war happening inside the Incan Empire, where there were two brothers fighting for who was going to be the next emperor, and it was Atahualpa. Yeah, Atahualpa. I think it's the name of the emperor. That one was Atahualpa, but he was already coming from a fight, and this made it easy or easier. It was not easy, but this made it more possible for Pizarro and his troops, his Spanish troops, to conquer the Inca Empire. And this also had a very tragic story where they captured Atahualpa, and they made him it's an interesting story that we should read about, because I don't remember it so clearly right now, but I remember there was treason, traición, and these stories are pretty intriguing. And in the end, Atahualpa, he decided to sacrifice himself, but Pizarro and his people, they didn't keep their word. Oh man. This story is, history, full of interesting stories. So, this class lasted too long. With 54 minutes, 55 minutes already. So I invite you people to, watch a video or something about these stories, so that you can learn more about your culture, man. This is our culture. Our culture is not Hollywood. We can watch and get entertained by Hollywood because they make decent movies. Well, they made better movies in the past. Nowadays, once in a while they make good movies. But this is our culture. Let's not confuse ourselves, which is our culture. So, on the next class, we're going to be talking about how the Europeans came and changed everything and created this mixture that Latin America is today. So, nice to see you guys. Thanks for sticking around for so long. I hope to see you soon, and take care during the COVID social distancing. Bye.